What's cooking, folks? Vermilion Phoenix here, and today we are jumping into some Orcs Must Die 3. This time we are headed to the lava pits. This is the 6th scenario in Orcs Must Die 3, and it is the first war scenario. I'm going to cover some of the story details just in case somebody's jumping onto this video first and hasn't actually played through War Mage. But essentially, this is the first level where you get an additional cinematic, and they go into sort of the backstory about why things are happening the way they're happening in this game. Essentially, you get introduced to young Cygnus, the teacher of Maximilian from the first Orcs Must Die, and also the guy who is responsible for having reopened the rifts after the end of Orcs Must Die 1. So he's got a bit of importance to the story. He's also like my favorite character from Orcs Must Die Unchained. Originally, actually no, not my favorite. My favorite was definitely still Zoe, but I enjoyed playing Cygnus a lot in that game. Just the way that he plays somewhat similar in this game, but projectiles overall from most weapons in this game are very tiny as far as their hit spheres or hit boxes go, so they just don't collide as well with enemies, which makes them a lot harder to use. And so, you know, he just doesn't play quite as well here as he would in the previous title. That said, that means that when you're able to select your traps going through here, you're probably going to have a much easier time than when you did initially going through the level, and that's fine. Most of the traps that we're going to be using here, you should have access to when you get to this level the first time, but just in case you don't, I would highly recommend not focusing too much on the bridge as the area where you plan to get most of your damage done. The walled section with the regular walls and the angled wall right after they get to the landing on the other side of the bridge, not the side that's closest to where the enemies spawn, but the side that's closest to your first gate that they have to break down, is probably the best place for you to build your defense. But it's not what I do here, so just a fair warning that you'll probably have better results doing that your first time than trying to set this up. However, one of the things that I like to show off is that crowd control in this game helps a lot, especially if you happen to build a significant source of damage around what the crowd control traps or just any sort of crowd control you set up will be able to do. Crowd control is kind of bad if you don't have damage built around it, because ultimately you'll just be keeping the minions away from things that will continue to deal them damage. And so you want to make sure you build up some damage in addition to making sure they're slowed down. That said, the trap that we'll mainly be using to deal a lot of the damage and deal with most of the minions coming through here is going to be the Buzzsaw trap. It's a normal version of the Saw of Arctos, which you may remember from Orcs Must Die Unchained. It doesn't have exactly the same dimensions. I believe it's not quite as long, but you have the ability to add the ice element to it because it starts as a physical element or physical damage trap in this game. So making sure that you've used the trap enough to even unlock the ice element will be important if you plan on using the setup, and then of course you'll need the skulls to make it work. So that's all something that you'll need to be aware of if you're going to do this. Of course, I'll have the details on the upgrades used in this level in the description, and you can feel free to check that out if you have any questions, or you can just ask me. Either one works. But we're going to be using that. We will have used the tar trap, which I believe you get on the 3rd level. And other than that, you really don't need too much else. You'll have most of the war traps that I'll be using here pretty early. The archers, Bank of Archers, I've used a few times, so they have their second volley unique upgrade on, which I use mainly because I tend to use them on areas where they might have fire fiends in some of the later war scenarios, and I just hadn't thought of changing it back. You could go with the fire damage arrow upgrade on this particular level just because there's not a lot of enemies that are fire resistant. However, later on, that is going to be kind of an issue, so I kind of just leave them as is. The second volley helps due to the fact that they're not super accurate, and it works with pretty much anything, because even if enemies are physically resistant, I don't think anything in this game is physical immune. So you can still get some damage from your physical traps, and that basically means they're universally okay. They're not always the greatest, but they work. So with the barricades, what we're doing here is we're setting up a pocket on the right side of the bridge where we're able to build archers. You could use regular guardian archers, which, I mean, even both the guardian archers and the regular archers have a unfortunately fatal flaw in this game, specifically for Rift Lord, where they don't recover. They don't have any HP regen. They will not come back unless there's a go break, and Rift Lord completely eschews the go breaks altogether. They just get rid of them. So if any of the archers die, which should only happen if they get into combat with other archers because they're blocked off by barricades, they won't be coming back anytime soon. That said, the Bank of Archers is significantly more archers for your bucks. And that's probably the only one that I would even see worthwhile as far as using, and they just fire a lot of arrows, which is nice. As long as you can keep the enemies from being able to circle around the barricades and attack the archers, they should do fine. I think there will be some later examples here of them actually getting around the barricades, and they'll knock off a few of the archers that I build towards the end. You can completely just not build that last section of archers to save them, and it'll save you some coin. It'll also let you build up some other things. You should also eventually be able to see me building out a section of the walls that I mentioned would be a better way to do this when you go through this your first time, just because it doesn't require your traps to be quite as upgraded, and it's still an area that's pretty strong and that you have the ability to add some other traps to when you first go through this. So, a couple of things. You have a significant amount of coin at the start of every war scenario. More than you probably gain during some of the earlier scenarios in the game at the end of the maps. So, you'll still get coin from killing the orcs and various minions that come through. So you get access to a lot of coin when you're going through this, and that means that you can really afford to experiment a bit if you have a little bit of time to play around with, mainly because if you're experimenting, these can take some time. That said, you don't really almost ever need the full 25 minutes to get through these levels, as long as you make sure you're building traps that deal damage. The more inexpensive traps, like the cheaper ones, like the spike traps, are able to pretty much blanket the starting area of this map and just deal a lot of damage to the orcs as they're coming out. Even with a lot of those out, they probably won't clear out everything, and they will get disabled hilariously bad when the boss Crag comes out. So it's not the best way to clear the last map, but enemies like the Guardian, or not enemies, but traps like the Guardian Archers can't be disabled. They just take damage, and they will help against the boss.
Easy.
So Crag isn't really the worst thing for you to worry about, as long as you have any sort of decent damage dealing abilities on whatever character you're playing. He also can't disable all of the traps indefinitely. Like, he has a little bit of a cooldown, so as long as your traps are spread out a bit, you should be fine. But also, you want to try to make sure that you have a couple of traps there to sort of have him debuff them or disable them, just so he doesn't just walk through disabling 100% of the stuff you have set up. So giving yourself a bit of room, or making sure that you have a few traps that aren't all just grouped up together in the starting area where the orcs come from, will go a long way in helping you deal with Crag. As for the way that this is set up here, we essentially have a viscous, it's not a viscous tar, it's just a tar trap, but we have the upgrade that slows enemies after they step off of the tar, which turns it into viscous tar from Orcs Must Die Unchained, and I have a habit of still referring to it as that, but we have the tar with the additional slow after enemies step off of it, and we combine that slowdown of the enemies as they group up with 2 of the buzzsaw traps with the ice element upgrade, and that means that if any enemies happen to not immediately die after the buzzsaw hits them, they will take a decent amount of damage from the saws going back and forth, and then they'll be able to get shot by the archers. This will make sure that for the most part almost no enemies actually make it through the full length of the bridge. The buzzsaw is a very strong trap. It probably still needs a little bit of sound balancing because it gets really loud when it triggers over other sounds, and I think that was the only trap that really had that big of an issue. There may be some others, but I recall the buzzsaw sound being particularly loud even after lowering a lot of the other game audio. Even so, it's just a really good trap. And you'll see that if you're dealing any sort of damage whatsoever, almost nothing gets through. I've walked away from here a few times before I even finish building it, and that's where some of the orcs happen to sort of run around the last section of the barricades and attack some of the guardian archers, but not too much gets through. And for the areas where they eventually start fatiguing out the cooldown on the buzzsaws and the tars, we build a couple of brimstones at the bottom, which take care of any runners that happen to get through. Now, you don't have to have the arcane brimstone upgrade that I use. I prefer it mainly because it deals this damage instantly rather than over time. The damage over time will still deal a significant amount of damage to runners and take them out with a single charge, but the benefit of the arcane damage on the brimstone is that they pretty much immediately detonate or die if they're sappers, and if they're runners they just poof as soon as they step onto it. So I like the visual effect, seeing them die immediately, and it means that you don't really have to worry too much about like that last mile directly after where you place the brimstone, where normally they burn out and maybe last a little bit longer. There's not really too many characters that have unique abilities that will benefit you too much here. I like specifically the arrow walls being placed there just because they will soften up some of the bigger orcs and the ogres specifically. Ogres are really tall in this game, and placing 2 wall traps on top of each other actually happens to deal quite a bit of damage. So if you're dealing with ogres or they seem to be a problem for you and you have a section where you can just do that, you can put arrow walls on both sides of an area that they'll be walking through, do it. Even without the fire damage upgrade, ogre armor really isn't meant to take the number of hits that they're going to take from all of those arrows. That's the last section of guardian archers that I build here, and those are the ones that manage to get attacked later on. But yeah, those arrow walls make a quick work of any large enemy, whether it be a boss or whatever. And this is when you start to see the kobolds actually start to get through the traps. So what happens is the kobolds get released in the middle of a wave. They'll have a bunch of orcs come out and they'll start to run into all of the traps, absorb the majority of the damage the traps can send out, and then the kobolds will sort of bleed through as the orcs are taking the damage so that they can make a beeline directly to the gate. And that's pretty much the best way that they use kobolds here. What you do with that, because they have the opportunity to, sort of run through traps directly after they're no longer dangerous, is you just build brimstone at the end. So you'll see that in a little bit from here. We actually build out the rest of the barricades that are going to go towards the back wall, and we put some brimstones in there with some more tar just to give it a little bit of time to slow things down. Slowing things down is always important if you're really trying to protect something. It's a bit more important if you're trying to go for perfect runs rather than just, winning. And there it is right there. So that'll take care of all the kobolds. if it didn't get hit by that last arrow, it pretty much would have poofed as soon as it touched the brimstone, and that's what we like to see. Now, this is the first section where you get to start building towards the walls. You get to put another, like, double-sided arrow wall thing going there. And that will deal a lot of damage to pretty much anything that makes it that far, which is really nice. As you get towards the rest of this, because this is only a few more minutes, you'll see a bit more that get built out, and we'll alternate the brimstone and the tar. But when we get to the other walls, there's a section towards the back of that little landing. You can see it as I'm running back here, that has angled walls that go down as well as straight walls. You can mix up your wall traps if you bring a decent amount of them. You can have like arrow walls coming downward at an angle. You can have grinders or wall blades or wall chargers or whatever you want going along the side of the wall. This is probably the better place. You can also have enemies sort of walk into that area as a little indentation. And you can do a lot with just making that place deal a lot of damage with relatively cheap traps. You can concentrate your money there, and it will give you a lot of bang for your buck. It's a really good place to concentrate your damage, your crowd control, pretty much everything. And that will probably work out best for handling most of the stuff that'll be coming through here. So this is still like the introductory war scenario, but there's a few things that you'll probably want to remember about these. While the volume of enemies will always be large, they're normally not going to toss 1,000,001 sappers at you. Mainly because you have so much coin that if you were to start bottlenecking in one place, just rebuilding the starting area of the bottleneck, which is where sappers normally try to blow things up, would be super easy. And even reinforcing it would be relatively cheap compared to the extra 20,000 or so coin that they normally start you with. The ability to get extra coin with combos, and just due to the number of enemies that you'll be facing, is also relatively easy. So, you know, feel free to play around with these. Like, the maps are big, they give you a ton of enemies. You get to build like some pretty ridiculous kill boxes, and since they give you the largest volume of enemies, if you're going for any kill counts to upgrade some of your traps, or you need to use a specific weapon or whatever to deal a certain amount of damage, these are the best places to do it. You can either focus on those specifically and not worry about par time, or you can just do all of them together, and in just like a few minutes you can probably master any particular weapon or trap, depending on exactly what it needs to do. Damage is a bit easier to gain than kills, mainly because the trap itself needs to gain the kill, but these are the best places to do it. Alright, so Crag's coming out, and this is the boss, and you might be able to see some of the things that I was talking about here with Crag sort of trying to disable things. He'll do his disable attack as soon as he gets close to any traps that he can disable, but he can't just spam it. He uses it and goes forward a certain distance. If you are not using this Mega Boom Barrel Thrower, you can try to set up the other mounted trap, the War Ballista, and you get to fire like 4 bolts in rapid succession with that, and then, you know, they sort of reload and fire again. They have a significant chance to make enemies flinch or get stunned, so you can just kind of rapid fire them at bosses or heavy enemies. We have enough crowd control and stuff going through here that I'm really not worried about that too much. But if you wanted to do something that was a little more accurate or direct for dealing damage to these guys, that would be a good way to go about it. You could even choose to put it at the end of the bridge and just sort of fire it towards the entryway, and that would basically probably prevent you from having to do any actual legwork with your characters. and would probably make this quite a bit easier. But I chose not to do that here just because I wanted to, you know, do the whole saw thing. And you'll see the traps get disabled as Craig starts running through. Most of the reason why he gets to sort of slowly disable everything going through here is because of all the crowd control happening. And you see, even with that, he doesn't make it through the bridge because of all the damage that the archers are laying down. And that's just about it. This is a pretty decent way to go through this level relatively quickly. It only takes about 14-15 minutes, which, you know, spares you the other 10 minutes that they offer you for the level. Your first time through, you may cut this a little bit closer. I think I did it in like 20 or 22 minutes when I was on War Mage, mainly because you have significantly less traps at that time. But this is sort of what this area back here looks like when you start to build it out more, and you can sort of see where you get a pocket for all the enemies to run through these wall traps right here, and building that out is extremely good. But that's pretty much going to be the level. Let me know what you guys think about it. Are any of you guys currently enjoying playing through Orcs Must Die 3? Let me know what your thoughts on the game are and the war scenarios in general if you can in the comments, and you know, just let me know how you're doing. Either way, thanks as always for tuning in. I sincerely hope you appreciated you know, just this look at Orcs Must Die 3, and I hope to show you some more soon. Until next time, as always, I want you guys to take care of yourselves. It's super important these days, especially with everything going on in the world, especially the US. And you know, as always, until next video, you can also catch me on Twitch. I should mention that again. Twitch.tv/RemillionPhoenix, just like the YouTube channel. I usually play somewhere around 4 to 5 times a week on Twitch, usually in the evenings, and on the weekends I have like a little family gaming session with the missus. So, you know, feel free to check that out, and we have a lot of fun there too. But usually it's more than just orcs there, and you'll probably see some of that getting over to the YouTube channel sometime in the near future. Not sure exactly when, but yeah, you know, check it out, and you know, until next time, have a good one, folks. Peace.